Hello, hello. Oh my gosh. Everything's great. How are you? Okay. So today we've got very important stuff going on today. And today we are going to talk about um, the law. All right. So welcome back to Webinar Wednesday. Today's Wednesday, and this is our webinar. So my name is Amber. I'm the Shah of Saint Augustine, Amber Shah, and I am a realtor here in Saint Augustine. I just took this fun class on core law, and I loved it so much that I wanted to share it with you. So today I had this really cool, oops, where did it go? There it is. So there's some gavel right there. You bang the gavel. Here, law and order. So last couple weeks ago, I started our webinar Wednesdays, and I wanted to introduce you to some stuff that I think is very important when it comes to real estate. So this is our real estate focused segment. You can go through all my other videos to see all the other fun stuff that I do. And then sometimes we have to buckle down, having fun and getting stuff done. So I did this fun course, and it was on the law in Florida for as it relates to real estate. And it was really cool. So I learned all this really cool stuff, and here is what it is. It was like people think that real estate is just contracts and keys. It's more than that, especially when I got into real estate because I thought that it was so easy. Honestly, I thought, oh, these realtors, they don't do that much. Okay. So then I was like, oh, this is going to be really easy. People just need to buy houses. Real estate's easy. Not much to it. You don't have to be a brain surgeon or a rocket scientist. But it's contracts, laws, and then hidden things that can absolutely wreck a deal if you don't know what you're doing. So today, we're going to get into what I call the Florida real estate danger zone. It's not scary, but if you're buying, selling, or even thinking about it, you need to hear this. So, what you don't know can cost you. All right, so let's start here. Florida is a disclosure state, but not in the way that you think. So in Florida, and I'm just going to play these scenes here in the background if you're watching this. So in Florida, it's a disclosure state, but some things that we don't have to disclose include, but are not limited to, a death in the home, right? So if somebody just died there, nobody needs to tell you that. Okay. But if you Google it and you look it up in the paper or something like that, and you find it on your own accord, then you decide whether or not you're okay with living there. Okay. So, Florida is a retirement haven. Okay. A lot of people come here to retire. So if you're not going to die in your house, where are you going to die? So, also in Florida, we don't have to disclose any kind of diseases that people have inside the house. So, more specifically, if somebody had like HIV or AIDS, nobody needs to tell you about that. And then, even certain property condition details, like the way that the house is. So, we have these seller property disclosures, and people fill stuff out all the time. And I actually just had a event on a group chat where we were discussing, somebody was saying they had a house where the septic had known issues and it was not on the seller's disclosure. And we were like, okay, well, if it's not on the seller's disclosure, what can you do? Because you find out that there's a problem with the septic. And I'm like, honestly, you can sue them, but then you have to like prove that they didn't do that on purpose and then also pay for legal fees. So like usually at the end of the day, the legal fees are what cost you all the money. So it's like people end up foregoing all this legal action because of the cost of getting a lawyer involved. All right. So it's like even like going to court and everything is not very expensive, but you have to have the right kind of representation because if you don't have the proper representation, then you might fill out the wrong form by accident, right? So you don't know what you're doing. You need someone who's knowing what they're doing. So I just took this fun real estate law class so I can know more about what I'm doing. And I'm also doing my broker course right now so that I can become more of an expert on real estate for both you and I, because I think that it's important for people to know what they're talking about. But, every time I tell somebody that you don't have to tell somebody if somebody died in their house, they're just like, wait, what? So, yeah, which is why, again, working with someone who actually guides you matters because honestly, if I did know that somebody died in that house, I would tell you. Um, because legally required and ethically guided are two different things, But it just so then it depends on who you're working with, how they operate. All right. And then also in Florida, since it is a retirement haven, and nowadays it is getting increasingly expensive to get into a home, and a large majority of current day buyers in this market are boomers. So, granny flats and aging parents and real life decisions. A friend of mine, actually, one of my close friends, her father just passed away and he had a will and they had a way. Uh, but, not to make light of the situation, but then there are like, do you like, when people die, sometimes people realize that they have assets and then they creep out. Those creepers be lingering out of the weeds and they come out and they be having their hand out and stuff like that. So I want to talk about something real for a second. Our aging parents and a lot of families are asking, can I bring my mom or dad onto the property? Because not only do we have the 55 plus communities, but we also have HOA communities that are somewhat restricted. So in Florida, we actually call that an accessory dwelling unit, aka a granny flat. But it's not just build it and they come. You actually need a county property appraiser application to build one. And you need to make sure that's okay with your neighborhood. And then if you have no HOA, you still need a state exemption form and the approval based on the zoning. So sometimes what feels emotional actually has these legal pathways that can impede upon your plans. All right. So if you have any questions about that kind of stuff, I'm more than happy to help you navigate that. And also flood zones. So the truth under the surface of flood zones, as we talk about something that people really underestimate in Florida, is flooding, because a lot of this state is just a boot sea level, and it's not always disclosed the way that you think it is. So what do I tell my clients is go straight to FEMA, because you can go onto the FEMA website and you can request flood history letters and you can check if there's ever been a claim to the property. And you can also talk to your insurance agent, because your insurance agent should be able to look into that as well for you. Because I don't care how pretty the house is, but the water will always tell the truth, because you could have a brand new build. I actually remember looking at one house that was in Davis Shores, and it was like a $300,000 house, and it was across the street from the edge of the island. So like across the street, there was like a little bit of a water view, which is highly valuable. However, the house had visual signs of flooding, and I could see that it had like up the wall, like maybe 18 inches up the wall, and I could see water damage. You could see like bubbling. You just see that the wall changes, and you're like, why is it like that? Does it look like it got built that way? Is that supposed to be like that? I don't think so. So if it does supposed to be looking like that, then that's fine. But also you can just go to FEMA, and there's a website that I always send my customers. And I actually just sent it out the other day to a customer that was looking at some land out in Hastings, because he was like, oh, I want to be living, on East or West Deep Creek. And I was like, that's a great area, but you have to be careful for the flooding, because some areas are in flood zones and some aren't. So obviously I want you to be a little bit, like a block or two away from a flood zone would be best. But yeah, he did send me one that was like halfway into what appeared to be a flood zone. So I was like, well, once you end up getting a wetlands delineation survey on that, and if because you have to get a wetlands delineation survey on it too if you want to build on it. So if you had vacant land that was right next to a creek and you're like, this is great, I'm gonna put my house here, my barn here, my whatever, and they go, okay, but the wetlands delineation survey says that you have wetlands that goes all the way up to here. So say like the creek is over there and then you got like 30, 40 feet or something, and you were like, well, I wanted to put like the barn back there. And they're like, well, you can't put nothing back there, bro. So sometimes you can get the wetlands filled in or whatever, but that's kind of expensive because it's called wetlands mitigation. So you can mitigate, but that is usually quite costly. It's like, I think I heard one time maybe $100,000 an acre, depending on what kind of fill you need and then like how wet it is, because the how wetness is going to be like how much fillness you have to put. Because like some people, they're like, oh, how much does it cost to fill in a lake? And you're like, I mean, how big is the lake? So, because, one truckload, 70 truckloads, that's a difference in price. So, but FEMA is a great resource that anybody can use for flood zones. And that was the most important thing about flood zones. And then, because we do have flood certifications and people fill those out, which is great. And then you can also get the elevation certificate of the property too. So that's good too. All right. But then we've got the money. Okay. So we've actually been having some legal changes regarding money, especially cash sales, because I'll tell you, my first sale was a cash sale, and that was beautiful. But did you know that now we've got some federal reporting changes that have been underway and just took place or are getting taking place in like the 25th? Something is imminent, very, very, very soon happening. So money, entities, the LLCs, the way that you report your income, it feels a little bit intense, but stay with me, okay? If you're buying cash under an entity, like an LLC or a trust or whatever, there's reporting requirements to FinCEN. Why? Because they're looking for those people that are trying to wash the money laundering. So they're trying to prevent money laundering, and who's doing money laundering and why. They're all different reasons. Go read I don't know, listen to a podcast about it. There's a guy, I believe, out of Tampa that used to be a money launderer, and he also used to be a mortgage broker. So he'd like make these mortgages and he'd put in baby social security numbers. Oh my God, he had this way of creating a credit line for a baby. And he was like, oh, it takes like 6 months or a year or something like that. So the more that these people get caught, and then the more that they start talking about it, the more you end up learning like what they do, right? So I forget that guy's name is, but anyway, so they're looking out for money laundering. They don't want people trying to get one over on like the mortgage company. Cause yeah, like I think this guy, he would like get these mortgages out, never intend on paying them back, because, and then he would take it out like literally on someone else's name. He found social security numbers for babies. It was a whole thing. So anyways, buyer initials and title company reports really shouldn't be optional. So some people do for sale by owner, and they end up missing some of this stuff, like a lot of the stuff, like the paperwork that you need for your title, and all that. So a lot of people buying cash don't even realize that this layer exists. And then being a foreign entity, being foreign, that also has requirements for different types of reporting at the end of the sale. Because did you know if you buy a property from a foreign entity or whatever, so like for some reason somebody lives in China, we're just going to say random country. So then any country, okay, any random country, England, but somebody lives in England and they own this property here, and then I buy it, and then I own it for a couple of months, and then I find out there was actually a foreign entity tax that in my contract could have had been charged to the seller because he's the one that lives in England or whatever, right? But so if you miss that part too, guess who's on the hook for those taxes, for those foreign entity taxes? The buyer. That's you. So you want a good realtor that can help you out and make sure that you don't have that kind of stuff missing or in your contract, so that then let's talk about solar. So I actually had a customer a year or so ago, maybe it was 2 years ago. They really wanted a solar paneled house. But did you know? So, because this one actually gets, people, it, everyone loves the idea of solar, but what they don't realize is that it can actually attach a lien to your house. And sometimes that could be up to $50,000. And you've got solar, PACE surprise liens. Sometimes you don't even know. And through PACE loans and financing, those get tied to the property. So a lien, PACE loan, financing, depending on who they put as like the asset. So then now you're not just buying a house, you might be inheriting debt. So you're like, oh, wow, what a great price in this house. And then you find out that it has like even more debt attached to it. So that's one thing that you actually have to be careful about when it comes to tax lien certificate sales and purchasing and stuff like that. So if you don't review Addendum EE, you might miss it. All right. So, oh, one of my lights just turned off, but it's okay. Get back over here, light. Aziz, light. There we go. All right. So, remember that from Fifth Element? If you do, we can totally be friends. Segment number 6. The hidden cost, right? So we've got ad valorem assessments. So ad valorem assessments, those are one of my favorites because it's so sneaky. All right. So if you close on a house, everything feels good. And then boom, new assessments show up. You got like sewer conversation or sewer conversion, because sometimes you get the septic and then maybe you have the option to switch over to sewer. Sometimes, a lot of times, it's way cheaper just to switch to the sewer. But did you know that sometimes, depending on your county, your water bill might double if you switch to sewer because they like count the water going in, but not the water going out if you have septic and stuff like that. It's crazy. So, stormwater also. Sometimes there are assessments for that you have to pay for the stormwater, redirection or whatever it's called, reconsumption, recycling. Community lighting. Some communities also have CDD fees that are like community development fees. So in St. Augustine, we have the development called Nocatee, and there's another one called Beach Walk, and then maybe also Silverleaf, I'm not sure, and then Entrada, definitely. They have CDD fees. So it's like you pay for this house, and then you pay HOA fees, and usually we're going to say $1,000 a year. And then sometimes they have CDD fees. So the CDD fees, those are almost like a tax. CDD fees are like a tax because the developer, they build the development and then they put all the roads together, but then the town decides that they don't want to pay to install any of the infrastructure for the electrical or the sewer or anything like that. So then the developer goes, oh, well, we'll do it. And then they pass it forward and they pay it forward to you. And then they make the people pay the CDD fees. So that's what that is. And then sometimes some CDD fees, like in Nocatee and then maybe also Beach Walk, they have like a water park. So if they have like a water park, then to me, that would make it worth it, and the little entertainment value, something like that. But a lot of times, the buyers, they go, no one told me this was coming. Exactly. So we have to look beyond today's taxes and ask ourselves what's coming next. So always got to know what else is going on, right? And then some opportunities that people miss. Let's flip it for a second because not everything is like a danger, right? But like, did you know that we have some really great opportunities here in St. Augustine? One is called the SHIP program, where literally maybe a dozen people, and I don't quote me on the number, but they give the SHIP program, St. Augustine, St. Johns County has like $100,000 that they can give to a family to purchase a home. So that's really cool. And then I don't think that the loan has to get paid back, or if it does get paid back, it's not like a monthly return system. It's like literally if they ever sell the house, then the sale money of that house gets deducted by like that 100,000. So if you were like buy a condo for like 250 on the SHIP program, pay 150 for it, have that for your mortgage, and then the SHIP program put in 100,000 towards it, then you sell the house within 10 years and then you make the sale of the house maybe 350, then 150 of 100 of that, only 100 of that because it's interest free, 100,000 of that gets paid back to St. Johns County, and that goes, either towards the other SHIP program or anything like that, whatever they decide to do with it. But we also have the Hometown Heroes program. It's a home down payment assistance program, and it's for people that work in jobs that are like heroist jobs, like nurses, firefighters, police officers, and stuff like that. It gives closing cost help, it gives down payment assistance, and then it gives like maybe 60 million is in that pool of money, and it goes pretty fast. So in that SHIP program, we also have a couple million. So if 100,000 gets split between like 10 to 20 families or something like that, then that's what we're looking for. And then you've got the My Safe Florida Home program, where you can get a free 4-point inspection and you can get grants to harden your home so that it'll enhance it for the future, and it'll be helping to maintain it. So fighting against all that humidity in Florida that damages pretty much everything. So, and then it also contributes to some savings in your insurance, but you have to know how to ask. So I could help you with that. And then we've also got the septic and sewer in Florida and all that good stuff. Let me get out of this one here and I'm gonna switch it up. All right, so check out these houses right here. Aren't they pretty? So septic, sewer, and the future of Florida, because Florida is shifting, right? So we've got the state wants less septic. Like if there are a bunch of septic tanks all over the place, and 50 years from now we start digging or whatever, and you dig into a septic tank, is that fun? No. All right. So more sewer systems. And then there's things like dry wells. Did you know now dry wells are illegal, but they still do exist? So if you're buying, you need to know what system you're inheriting, because further out into central Florida, you're going to see some of these dry wells. You might even see gray tanks. And then you do have septic out there. Especially, the further you get away from a main road, then the more likely you are to be having some septic. So what that costs to fix later is going to be the problem for you. Okay. So I even had someone who bought a house a couple years ago, and she had the septic system fail, and we had the seller pay to help replace the septic, and she paid almost half, something like that. And then I just had a group chat where somebody else had a similar story. They said, "Oh, we have to get a new septic. What should we do?" I said, request that as a repair and see if they'll replace it for you." And I told them, expect to put in there up to like maybe $30,000 as the amount. And they agreed. And that's great, because did you know? So in Massachusetts, I actually had the option when I sold my house back in 2021. I had a septic system. It was 30 years old, and it's a true or false. If the septic system is 30 years old or older, it will fail. So I knew that my septic system was going to fail. And we got a quote in Massachusetts, like 40,000, 45,000 to replace the septic system. And then we were lucky and we were able to tap into the sewer, and it costed around $5,000 to connect to the sewer, but we didn't have to pay $45,000 to do a whole new septic system, which sometimes might be the requirement. So know those kinds of things. And then the contracts. We've got the contracts, leases, real life, logistics. What hits here, because these matter, tenants, buyer gets a lease within 5 days, or condos, and you get 7 days to review and rescind. Airbnbs, there's an addendum for that too. DSCR loans can help you if you want to pick up like a rental property and you don't know how to begin. So if you ever feel like you're unsure, you can always bring in your attorney. That's always the answer. Real estate attorneys. I might become one day. That is a goal of mine, because the attorneys, they're the ones that have all the final say as far as interpreting the law, because they can teach me what it means, and then sometimes they end up deciding that it means something else or whatever. And I'm like, I thought that it meant this. Oh, well, the lawyer says this. Well, the lawyer is going to be the last straw. So even here, I joined the HOA board for my own HOA, and I'm really excited because we actually have a meeting tomorrow. But I'm excited to learn about it, and more about how real estate isn't just buying a house. It's understanding like the systems, asking better questions, protecting your future. This whole like mindset shift, you know, because the deal isn't just in the price, it's the structure, the risks, the unseen details, stuff that you don't even think about. Weird stuff that I've experienced in my past. I'm like, oh, you better look out for this because this happened to me and this is definitely going to happen to you. And you can say that you don't think it will, but I know it will. And if you're out there scrolling through the listings, dreaming about your next move, just remember that it's all about making clear, informed decisions that help support your life. And if you're thinking about buying or selling in St. Augustine, or if you just want to understand what this could look like for you, you can comment down below, comment move, or reach out directly. You can always ask me to give you a call. I'm happy to do that. We'll walk through it together. All right, so let's continue to keep it real and keep it messy, but always like intentional, right? And let me know what you want to hear about next time here on Webinar Wednesdays with the Shah of Saint Augustine. Bye.